Welcome to the Gold Report, where we inspire you to be 10% more courageous in your daily life. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We have a special guest and a good friend on the show today. We'll be right back.
Somebody comes to us when they are the most vulnerable. We have an obligation to our patients to tell the truth as we learned it and to not politicize it. We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money it is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't see how you can actually derive informed consent.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
Our medical industry has objectively been compromised in more ways than one.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
On today's show, we have Miss Andrea Haim. She is an attorney based in Dallas, Texas. You may remember her husband, Dr. Andrea Haim, who's been on the Gold Report in the past. He is the whistleblower who exposed that Texas Children's Hospital was lying to the public about the existence of a transgender program for children. I don't call it the transgender program. I call it medical mutilation of children. But Texas Children's Hospital had a transgender surgical hormonal program, and they promised the Texas Attorney General that they were not going to do that program when the Texas Attorney General informed them that that could be considered child abuse, which of course it is. Chopping off body parts would be called child abuse in any sane society. So Texas Children's Hospital told the Attorney General, we're not going to do that. And as soon as they told the Attorney General that, a few days later, they restarted the program. So Dr. Haim was a brave anonymous whistleblower who alerted the world to the fact that this program was still going on, even though they said it wasn't going on. So he's been, for his brave deeds, Dr. Haim has been massively punished. He was arrested, indicted, dragged into court. He's charged with various, in my opinion, fabricated felonies, and is facing a potential 10-year prison term. And his story has really captured the attention of the nation. So he's been in and out of court multiple times, and most recently, a few weeks ago, the prosecution attempted to put a gag order on Dr. Haim, saying on top of everything else, adding insult to injury, that he should not talk about this terrible thing that the government of the United States of America is doing to him. So we are here today to talk to his wife, Dr. Andrea Haim, who will explain to us what is going on legally and about that request on the prosecution to do a gag order on this whistleblower. We're not speaking to Dr. Haim directly, specifically because the prosecution has asked that Dr. Haim be thrown in jail if he was to talk, including being on the show. Thank you very much, and let's welcome to our show, Miss Andrea Haim. So I'm very happy to welcome to the show today, Miss Andrea Haim. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Gold. It really means a lot. I'm really happy to be here. As you mentioned, my name is Andrea Haim. I'm a lawyer in Dallas, and I'm married to Andrea Haim.
I just have to share with you that, like, your husband, I found him just because of all the social news that was out there. He found me, whatever, but his story is amazing, and our audience is familiar with it. So I'm so excited to tell the audience this is Dr. Andrea Haim's wife.
Yeah, that would be me. I haven't been in the public eye very much. I'm really not a public person. I wasn't intending on speaking out and doing it. I have a 2-month-old baby sitting in the other room with her dad right now. So I'm speaking out because, my husband is under what we've been calling a de facto gag order.
Yeah. So let's just slow down and share with the audience a little bit, because, you know every detail, and I know many of the details, but most people don't know the details. So let's just set the stage for them a little bit. So your husband was doing his surgical residency, a couple of years ago. He's finishing up, and he discovered some pretty horrific things, which our audience does know. And he blew the whistle on Texas Children's Hospital. Kind of like me, you guys got visited by feds. And I meant to make a joke at the time, because when he explained the story to me, he said there was a knock on the door and there were armed armed guards like from HHS. And my first instinct was, I didn't know that Health and Human Services had guns. I mean, that just seemed funny to me. But you were
I
there
know.
when he was, you were there. How did that feel? Like you were getting ready for him to graduate his program.
Yeah, absolutely. It was probably the most surreal date of my life. And I've had a lot of surreal dates since then, but that was, the beginning and it was the most surreal. So I wasn't even at the door when all this happened. I was actually getting ready because it was my husband's graduation day. So I was in the shower, I was, doing my makeup, and Aton comes in and he says, "Hey, there's somebody at the door. They say they're from HHS." Uh, and so I think we both immediately, my heart just sank because I knew what it was about. Not because Aton had done anything wrong, but as you know, what happens when you challenge the dominant political narrative of the Biden administration. I knew immediately what it meant. And so I quickly, was getting ready, and I think I had half a face of makeup on, and my hair was still wet. I go out, and Aton is sitting at our dining room table with two agents. Like you mentioned, they're armed from HHS, and they're talking to him about reporting a statement, and they're pulling out, a tripod to film it. And the lawyer in me just says, "Whoa, let's back up here." I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I know from criminal adjudication 101 that when the feds show up at your door, you have the right to ask for an attorney.
Yeah.
So we walk into our bedroom and I say, "Hey, look, I think, we just need an attorney." And we went back out and told them that. And that's when they served us the target letter saying that Aton was the potential target of a criminal investigation regarding medical records.
Wow. So first of all, thank God that, he's a young doctor married to a young lawyer. It's kind of like parents' best fantasy, like, oh, doctor, lawyer, it's fantastic. But you
The
proved
rabbi said that at our wedding.
you just proved to be like incredibly important because you're in the moment and you're not, Dr. Eitan Haim is a law abiding citizen. And his first instinct was, sure, I'll talk to you. I haven't done anything wrong. And thank God the lawyer in you just kicked in. So you've been through, and Dr. Haim has been through so much since that there's not enough time to go through it, but essentially just tremendous targeting and all of that. And what we're really going to focus on today is, with your permission, is the latest legal news. So again, for the audience, Dr. Haim is having to go through this terrible legal ordeal where the Department of Justice is coming after him, even though he's the whistleblower on what Texas Children's Hospital has done wrong. And now he goes in and out of court, in and out of different court dates. And I think just if you could bring us up to speed, starting with, I think it was about 2 weeks ago when you were having the latest hearing, that would be incredibly interesting for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think 2 weeks ago, on December 3rd, about was the most recent hearing. And that was a hearing on the government had asked to impose a gag order on Aton. And prior to that, I don't remember if Aton had been on your show, but a couple of the developments that happened before that we think may have precipitated the gag order were that, maybe a few weeks ago, there was a hearing on our motion to dismiss where the government really embarrassed themselves. And this is something that Aton talked about on X in posts using excerpts from public transcripts, where the judge really, laid into the prosecutors for having typos in their indictment.
So I'm going to pause you. I'm going to pause you here because there's so much here. So Dr. Haim has been whining, your husband has been whining his way through the court system, battling the bad guy. So he's the good guy because he whistle-blew on something bad and illegal and morally repugnant that Texas Children's Hospital is doing, which is the medical mutilation of children. And no matter what you think on this subject, dear viewers, Texas Children's Hospital had told the state of Texas that they're not doing it. So anyway, there he is, the good Samaritan whistleblower, and he's winding his way through the trial. But Dr. Haim has learned the hard way that to be quiet is only going to embolden the bad guys to do terrible things to him, like put him in prison. So he's speaking out. He's speaking out on X and on other social media. And it's this speaking out that has now become the issue before the judge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And to the prosecutors, you may wonder what's that issue here? What is he saying? Is he saying anything bad? And absolutely not. He's exercising what I think is the purest form of freedom of speech, which is the ability to criticize the government and to expose the corruption that he's experienced in the last year and a half since the Fed came to our door in June of 2023. So some of the things that he was saying on X, he was showing, as I was mentioning, clips from a motion to dismiss hearing, all public, where they embarrassed themselves. He's talking about how the government is corrupt, which it is. He's talking about how he's calling them prosecutors incompetent, which they are. And he's, talking about the merits of his case and his innocence. And that's always been what his public profile is about. And that's why he's been speaking out, because we were in darkness for over 6 months. He didn't go public until January 2024.
Yeah, so this is the timeline, is that Dr. Haim essentially, he's quiet for a long time. He's quiet for 6 months, you said. That's right. It was about 6 months. And then he starts speaking out publicly in around January 24. And I've been very impressed. So when I follow him on Twitter, on X, he does do what you're saying, is he tends to simply relate the legal proceeding. Sometimes he has an opinion thrown in there, like this is foolish or this is an incompetent thing. And which is fine. That's pure First Amendment. I mean, we've all heard Donald Trump say Rosie O'Donnell's ugly, for example. You're allowed to say your opinions. That's all it is. But mostly it's informative. Mostly he's just relating what you said, the fancy legal words like motion to dismiss. He'll just like lay it out there. So I'm a free speech absolutist. Anyone who believes in freedom, I think, has to be a free speech absolutist. There's really almost no speech that can be suppressed. And even if you were the kind of person who thought that hate speech shouldn't be legal, that's not even what Dr. Haim was doing.
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
So the prosecutor files, tell us as a lawyer what the prosecutor filed to quiet your husband.
So the prosecutor filed something called a motion for a gag order, which was essentially asking the judge to, tell Aton that he can't speak out pending trial. The trial date has now been moved to February. So they are essentially asking the court. Initially, it was unclear the scope of what they were asking for, but they said that Aton was encouraging the online bullying of prosecutors, was initially what their basis was. Mind you, these are prosecutors in Houston, Texas, federal prosecutors. This is a district that regularly goes up against the cartel and hardened criminals. And, these prosecutors are essentially crying about the fact that Aton was being mean to them and that he was exposing what they were doing, and they don't want that to come to light. And so they said that he was bullying prosecutors and that the speech that he was using was inflammatory and likely to, I think in their words, taint a jury pool. Now, this is an absolutely absurd argument. The jury pool that we're talking about is 5.5 million people. I think last I checked, Aton has 30,000 X followers, and only a small percentage of people even get their news from X. Nobody would have even heard of Aton. So clearly a pretext to silence him from speaking out, because what he was speaking out about was their corruption and their incompetence and theory of conflicts that we learned about recently that are held by the prosecutor, and they wanted to shut all of that down. So they asked the court for a gag order to tell Aton not to speak publicly about his case, about the prosecutors in particular, before trial.
So when your husband told me this, I was just floored, because the entire weight of government has come against you and your family, and the prosecutor is crying about the pain of a tweet they don't like.
Yes.
I mean, they're threatening you with jail, prison, threatening you and harming you financially right this minute. Yes. But they're upset about him talking about what they're doing.
Absolutely. And that's that's why I felt so compelled to speak out after this, because it's unbelievable really when I think about it, that after everything that we've experienced, they're trying to put Aton in prison for 10 years. That's what the felonies in their indictment carry. And they're made up felonies, by the way, for various reasons I can talk about later. But at the same time that they're doing that, they're trying to deprive him of the right to speak out about it. I mean, it's absolutely Soviet. It's wrong. And, to me, I just felt that someone needed to say what was going on, because the only reason that we've been able to get this far, the only reason we've been able to pay for the amazing legal counsel that we have is because Aton has been speaking up and telling the truth. And it's been something that I, hope has been, something that makes other Americans realize what's going on in our government.
So the prosecution asked to gag your husband. And then what
Mhm.
did the judge do when the government asked that your husband be gagged?
So I saw someone refer to it, and I think this was brilliant, as Schrodinger's gag order, which is that he didn't grant or deny. So we don't know if it exists or if it does. And what he did was he didn't deny the gag order, but he also didn't grant it. He, held it open. It sort of as a live motion. And he threatened Aton and his legal counsel by saying that if they continue to engage in similar conduct to what he had been posting on X about the prosecutors, about the conflicts, using what the prosecutors called inflammatory language, that he was going to impose a gag order and do a number of other things, including sanction Aton's attorneys and potentially throw Aton in federal prison. He said that on the record. He threatened to throw Aton in federal prison if he continued to engage in similar conduct to what he's been doing on X. What this means at bottom is if Aton continues to call the prosecutors incompetent, corrupt, if he continues to talk about their financial conflicts, we don't know exactly what the contours of this order are, and that's non-order order are. And that's what makes it so scary, because we don't know what he can talk about and what he can't. It appears to be defined solely by what the government doesn't like. And that's really terrifying.
So this is really interesting because he did not put the gag order on, but he didn't get rid of the gag order motion either.
Mhm.
I don't practice law myself, even though I'm a lawyer. But I had never heard of such a thing, and it seems very self-serving because almost certainly, if the judge had issued a gag order against Dr. Haim, almost certainly that would be reversed on appeal. But if he doesn't do it, he's letting Dr. Haim continue to speak words that probably the judge doesn't like either. Certainly the prosecution doesn't like. So he walked this line in the middle
Mhm.
where your husband's walking on eggshells, doesn't know what to do, and the judge is sitting pretty. That's how I see it. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's how I see it. I'm wondering what you say about
That
this.
I think that's a great summary. That's how I see it as well. And I think that's ultimately what the issue is here, is that if what he's done by threatening the defense into, not speaking out about in some vague way that we're not really sure what that means, he's insulating that decision from appeal, because gag orders are very rarely, almost never granted. I've never heard in my years of practicing law of an order, non-order like this, particularly when it involves something as important as a core constitutional right like free speech. To limit someone's speech in this way without making it appealable to the Fifth Circuit, I think is you really nefarious. And that's why Aton and his attorneys, have to be careful. And Aton, the reason I'm here today is because Aton's abiding by that. He's respecting the court's decision, and he's not speaking out, speaking out about other things, but he had not been speaking out about his case, and that's for a reason. But I couldn't sit by idly and watch his First Amendment rights be taken away without doing something about it, and that's why I decided to post on X.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so just to remind everybody that if we don't have the ability to speak freely, we actually don't have any freedom at all. It all flows from there. It all flows from there, which is why our founding fathers made it the very First Amendment with the Second Amendment just to back it up. But
Right.
so, so this is very interesting because your trial, Dr. Time's trial, was supposed to be a week or two ago, early December, and that for various reasons got pushed back. The prosecutor, I guess I have two things to ask you, which are so interesting. One is why, how, what the circumstances were that it was pushed off until February. And related or unrelated, the prosecutor got removed from the case. To me, it seems like she got thrown off the case, but that in and of itself is a very interesting little tidbit. And in whichever order you like, but I think those are two interesting aspects.
Sure. So the first on the trial date getting moved, that happened recently at the same hearing that the gag order. The trial's now been moved, I think, the reflection of February 10th. So The reason that that got moved was a couple of things. There were a lot of motion, back and forth between both parties. We had moved to dismiss the indictment. The real issue is that they had refiled their indictment for the third time. And what that means is the initial charging document from June 2024 had to be amended twice because of fatal errors made by the prosecution. In the first indictment, they were charging him with non-existent crime. They were saying that he had harmed patients, that he disclosed patient information, even though they never officially charged him with disclosing HIPAA information because they knew he didn't. So there were really serious problems in the first indictment. And they learned new information that completely contradicted everything that that was the initial basis of their claims, which was that they said in that indictment that Aton had no reason to be treating patients at Texas Children's Hospital. We learned subsequently that we always knew, but it came out in discovery that that was absolutely not true. Aton was treating patients at Texas Children through at least April 2023, when they said that he had no reason to be there. So the factual basis for their indictment was completely wrong. And so instead of saying, oh, wow, we messed up, let's just drop this case, which is what any sane prosecutor should have done, they went back and they redid the indictment. But the indictment that they redid just took out those facts. It's still on a theory that, to be honest, I don't understand. I have no idea how that's a felony, what they're accusing him of. And it included fatal typos, including in the very thing that they were charging him with. So absolute incompetence on top of maliciousness. So last month, sorry.
Before you go on, just hold that thought. So they charge him with something that the facts don't support. I'm just summarizing for the viewers. They charged Dr. Haim with something the facts don't support. Basically, they said that he was looking through medical records that he had no right to look through. And then lo and behold, the facts show that of course he had a right to look at these records because he's a doctor working in that hospital taking care of these patients. So any normal scenario, you would rip up the indictment and really apologize to the person for dragging them through this. So that's about right?
Right. That's right. But that's not what happened. And so instead they go back and they redo the indictment. They just take out all of the things about how he had no right to be there. I think what they're claiming is that he may have had general access to the Texas Children's system. They have to concede that now. But they're saying that he exceeded what the hospital allowed him to access, which is an insane legal theory. Essentially, their legal theory is that if you exceed the hospital's policy on access, and they never even established that Texas Children's had such a policy, then you could be liable for a felony, carrying 10 years in federal prison. I mean, it's an absolutely insane legal theory. It's never been argued that way before, and it actually contradicts the Department of Justice's view on other cases involving what's authorized access. So the indictment has been, ridiculous from the start, and the more iterations that we have of it, the crazier it becomes. So they have the first indictment. The facts are completely wrong. They have to redo it. We then have a second indictment, which still contains incorrect facts. It says that Aton used the patient information, which is not part of the statute. It's not part of the crime. They just included it gratuitously to prejudice him. And then they also include these typos where the basic document that the jury has to decide, i.e., what is the statute, is wrong. They called it provision XL, which doesn't exist. And it was an absolute, display of incompetence. So then they, go to the court. We have a hearing on this. The judge, is angry about this. And he tells the prosecution, are you given, they essentially want the judge to fix it for them. They say, we don't need to reindict. The judge can just fix these errors. And the judge eventually says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing your dirty work for you. And he asks them point blank, prosecution, are you going to get another indictment to fix the typos? And they say on the record, no. So we thought, end of story. They told the court, we're not going to reindict. 2 days later, they changed their mind. They say, actually, never mind. We are going to get a third indictment, And so that's exactly what they did. So now there's a third indictment, which fixed the typos and takes out the gratuitous language about, whether or not he used patient information, which is not part of the statute anyway. So that's why the trial, I think, was ultimately moved, because there's now a third indictment that needed to that we needed to go back.
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure that I really understood this. Wow, our government is really out of control.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. So the power of the prosecutors is fierce, that they can just do this and drag an American through this.
And then the other thing I would add is we had no idea how we even got this indictment. Our Aton's attorney filed. They wanted to see essentially what is it that the prosecution is telling the grand jury, because we knew that the facts that they told the grand jury to get this indictment in the first place were egregiously wrong. So we really have no idea. The judge, denied Aton's lawyer's request to look at the grand jury information. But I think that's, a big point here is, what are they telling the grand jury, and what are, because there's absolutely no evidence of what they're accusing him of. So, either someone is, I don't know who their witnesses are. I don't know what those witnesses are saying. There's a saying in the Justice Department and really countrywide that, a decent prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get an indictment, as you're aware of from your own experience. But I think that, just the extreme factual errors in this case raise the question of what is it that they're telling the grand jury anyway, because we have no idea.
Yeah, you kind of wonder, like, is it the same, the same grand jury all three times? Like, are they hearing, or are they just de novo? Oh, there's this doctor who's doing this crazy stuff. It's crazy. Oh my goodness gracious.
So to your question, yeah. So the trial for that bereavement, and there's a lot of other involving our lawyers' request to dismiss and things like that. There's a lot going on in this case. So the judge moved the trial date to February. After he had, on the second indictment, essentially removed the trial date altogether. At the gag order hearing, he says, okay, we're going to try this case in February. So that's where we're standing now. February 10th is his new trial date.
Okay. And it was very unusual that they removed the prosecutor from the case. What?
Yeah. I can't tell you. We don't know what the answer is. So the main prosecutor on this case was a woman named Tina Amsari. She's the prosecutor in the Southern District of Texas in Houston. And she's the one who really, when Aton told the story last time he was on your show, she's the one who really was driving the boat, her and the FBI. And now, recently we learned of serious financial and political and personal conflict that she has with Texas Children's and with other related hospitals and Baylor College of Medicine. There were those questions about what was her motivation for bringing this case all along. Those conflicts included things like her brother is the CEO of their family company, which was previously run by her dad, and they have substantial coffee contracts to provide coffee to several hospitals in the Texas Medical Center. He and her aunt are major fundraisers for Texas Children. We're talking about, hosting fundraisers that raise millions for the hospital, where they appear with the CEO of Texas Children's, and various other things with her aunt as a political, it's highly involved in Democrat politics in Houston, and previously ran for Dan Crenshaw's seat. She was the regional director of HHS at the beginning of this investigation, at the same time that her niece is, targeting a group in investigation. It's just great. And this woman has, extensive contacts with LGBT groups in Houston, has, they're shown some indication of being in support of transgender care for minors. It just raises a lot of questions. If you have all of these family ties, did she disclose these things to the DOJ before taking the case? What was her involvement? Does she know the people that are involved in the case? The Texas Children's CEO? We don't know.
And I just want to point out to everybody that you could easily find a prosecutor who didn't have these conflicts. I mean, there's a lot of prosecutors in these offices. I mean, you're a prosecutor, there's a lot of prosecutors who wouldn't have had this conflict. And it's very important to the appearance it's very important to justice that we also have an appearance of justice. So let us assume that she's completely innocent of any bias, which is hard to imagine everything that you said, but let's assume that. It certainly would make a person think she's biased when you hear all the background. So why would you do this? Why would our system want to create doubt in the public's mind? I know that if I read a story like this and I heard the background of the prosecutor, I wouldn't believe it then if she brought all these things. So if we really want to believe in our system, you have to have people who are dispassionate, unbiased. So this is crazy. This is a very funny. I just want to digress for a second because I think it's humorous. I don't know if you know this, but the January 6th judge who decided I was, guilty and a horrific, horrible, terrible person. I'm gonna watch her face now. He and I were law school classmates and had a friendship. Yeah, and a little bit more. So one would think that a judge would recuse himself because the standard is the appearance of impropriety. So, but you would actually not be correct because apparently being in a law school class with only 145 students in the class and knowing each other really well for 3 years is not a conflict. So it's been quite an education that you and I have had about like what is defined as a conflict if you're the person who benefits from the conflict.
Absolutely, that's shocking. Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it makes me think, why do we have these conflict rules if they're not going to be enforced? And when it comes to the conflict for prosecutors, the standard is slightly different than for judges. But regardless, if a reasonable person is going to raise questions about whether or not you can be disinterested, that's not a prosecutor that should be assigned to these cases.
Yeah.
And like you said, if we have a free and fair justice system,
Right.
and
And
keeping appearance of these conflicts, raises serious questions. So I'm not sure if that was the reason that
right.
she was removed from the case, or if she left the case for that reason or not. It just did something that came out shortly before she filed, to withdraw from the case. And interestingly, initially when she withdrew from the case, she had also slightly before that at the hearing about the typos in the indictment, had really been pretty heavily criticized by the judge, for bringing this indictment in the first place.
Right. Right. So
These two things happen. She asked the court to withdraw. When she asked the court to withdraw, she does it under seal, which is very strange. Essentially, she wanted to hide it from the public record that she was removing herself from the case. So we actually, had asked for the court to unseal it, and there was a intervention from, I don't know if you're familiar with the website, Not the Bee. They're the sister site to the Babylon Bee, and they publish actual news. It's sort of the non-satire side of the Babylon Bee. And they had asked the court to unseal that, as well as several other documents, saying that it's the right of the press to, review the public record in Aton's case, and the public deserved to know why she withdrew and for what reason. So we don't know. The judge did unseal that motion. She didn't say why she withdrew from the case. She just said she was going to withdraw, and the judge let her do so. So we have a new head prosecutor who was kind of the second chair on the case before. So it's the same team, just minus.
yeah. Right. And I definitely don't want to imply that I have any idea why that she got removed, but we know that there was a lot of incompetence throughout the case. There's been a lot of irregularities such that you've required to have 3 different indictments, all of which are getting weaker and more distant from the facts that they alleged in the beginning. And we have, for sure, she has a lot of contacts on a particular political side that happens to be attacking Dr. Haim. So, these things, I raise them because they're concerning. I don't care what the reason is. They're concerning. We need a dispassionate legal system. If not, as you said, we're living in the Soviet Union. So a couple things. I definitely want everyone who hears this and watches this to be supporting Dr. Haim, and it's very important to get the message out. And let's just say that at the end, I'm just wondering, how has this affected you and your life and your family? I mean, you're a young lawyer. I'm curious if this has kind of soured you on the legal system, if it got you more energized about the legal system. Like, how has this affected you and impacted you professionally? And then kind of the cost it's taken on you personally.
Yeah, so professionally, it's been difficult. As you mentioned, I actually work for the Department of Justice. Certainly I'm speaking in my personal capacity. And I think in some ways it's energized me because it's shown me that as much change as I think is coming, hopefully, in the new administration, we still have these absolutely fatal problems in our legal system. I had never really stepped into the shoes of a criminal defendant. I've been on the civil defense side, but I had never appreciated how difficult it is to be on the other side of a government investigation or prosecution. And it is incredibly hard. You are fighting an uphill battle. And in a case like this, where if they want to go after you, they can ruin your life just by bringing these in statements and just by initiating these investigations. So personally, for me, I still have a lot of hope because I've seen some of the best lawyering I've ever seen. Both through my husband's legal team and others who have supported the case. So I have hope for the judicial system for sure, but it's made me hyper aware when I do this work myself of if what I'm doing is for the right reason, is it justified? Is it something that's absolutely necessary to serve the ends of justice and the American people? So that's certainly something that I've become more aware of through this case.
Right.
Personally, it takes a huge toll. I mean, I think Akon talked about this before. It's been absolutely devastating for our family, financially, emotionally. Just a quick story and I think I've told you before, when our daughter was born about 2 months ago, and I had an emergency C-section, and my husband had to leave my post-op suite to go to Houston to appear in federal court because he was required to. So he spent about an hour and a half with me. I'm still mostly unconscious, and our daughter, newborn daughter, before he had to go to Houston. And the closest I came to speaking out before this gag worker thing was then, because just the absolute weight of being, I had my parents with me, but being essentially alone without my husband in the hospital with a newborn daughter who may not see her dad for 10 years due to a federal indictment was crushing. And, I think about that all the time. Jill, I mean, it's one of those things I think you learn to live with and deal with, and can't let it get to you too much. You have to just do what you need to do and move on. But it uh, it certainly did been difficult at times, and I think the support that we've received is really what keeps us going.
You know what? It's so upsetting when I hear a story like this because there just is no compensation. There just is no compensation. And you're right, you have the right attitude, you have to proceed anyway. But these are like once in a lifetime moments. The birth of your first child, and it should
Mhm.
be like this joyous moment for the family. And then there's not only is he absent, there's so much stress around it. Um, Guys, Americans, we really need to be awake and pay attention. Dr. Haim and his wife are accomplished, but otherwise very ordinary American citizens. And look what the government has done to them and put them through. And I wanted to say, as a lawyer, the quality of your lawyering and the quality of your legal team is really unbelievable. This stuff's expensive, and it's also just plain hard work. It takes a lot of time, and it takes, of course, a lot of money because you need excellent lawyers, not easy to find. And that's why I want everyone to be donating to your fund, because this stuff doesn't happen by accident. You have to have a person who's willing to fight, who's willing to stand up. You may not have known everything that was coming at you, but you knew some stuff was going to come. I mean, you wanted to be anonymous. That was the intent, but you didn't back away once the anonymity was stripped from you. So you need a person like that. That was the kind of person I am. But then you need a team of soldiers. And in the 21st century, those soldiers are called lawyers. And you need to find lawyers, and you need to pay the lawyers. Please tell everyone how they can support you and Dr. Haim in this battle, not only for him being brave enough to be a whistleblower on a morally repugnant and illegal actions that Texas Children's Hospital was doing, but on the fact that our government is trying to strip your husband of his First Amendment rights. How can people support you?
So the best way to support us is, as you mentioned, we have absolutely incredible lawyers, but they are expensive, and they are still expensive throughout all this. Every time the government files something like a gag order or a new indictment, it costs us tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands to fight. I mean, in order to fight this, you really do need top quality legal counsel, and that's what ATOP had. The way to support us is to go to ATOP's fundraiser at gibsandgo.com/Texas_whistleblower to financially donate to his legal defense. And in addition, anything would help, but there's also a way that you can, send him support and prayers, to support us, through that. And then just to help us get the story out. I published on X about, what was happening in this case because Aton is trying to respect the court and not do that. So I felt, that I needed to speak out. And so for people to share our story is also an incredible help as well.
Excellent. So we will put those links up for sure. We will let everybody know. And I just want to say thank you. I know that this wasn't the path you planned for yourself. Your husband has said many times, you finish your training and then you're going to go move off to a small town and have just a, quiet, lovely American life. And here you are at the center of a firestorm. As somebody who's been through the firestorm a couple of years ahead of you guys, you will absolutely emerge intact and stronger. And your daughter and, God willing, more children will be so proud of their mom and dad. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on The Gold Report, where we hope to have inspired you to be 10% more courageous. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.